Hi, welcome to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all of the places you can find me online should be linked below. I'm most active over on Instagram, where you'll find me as both Rainbow Ange and Yarn and Yarns. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I say it every week, but I really do appreciate your company as I sit here and waffle on about my adventures in knitting and spinning and crochet. I always appreciate you spending time with me every week, but this week I want to start the episode with a very big heartfelt thank you to everyone who has already left comments on the previous video. If you've joined us here before, you'll know that I have a giveaway running on the last video, just as a way of me saying thank you for all of your continued support. I also mentioned last week that I had recently started a coffee donation link. A few people had reached out and asked if there were ways to support the podcast, and you are always supporting just by watching and by liking, subscribing, sharing that you're watching. A lot of people do that over on Instagram, just spreading the word about the channel, and I really do appreciate all of those interactions. But a couple of people had reached out and asked if there was any other way to support the channel, so I decided to start a coffee donation link. And last week I mentioned that I would be completely transparent and tell you about anything that I receive through that link. So today I have been so very grateful to receive a tripod in the mail. So I received donations to the tune of £18 last week, which I was completely blown away and thrilled by, because I know it's not within everyone's means to support makers and creators financially with those sorts of donations. So the fact that anyone was able to was just really special for me. And so, yes, I spent £15 of that £18 on this tripod, which means I should be able to hopefully go out and about and do a bit more recording, take you to some of the places in my local area that some of you have said that you enjoy seeing in the little clips that I sometimes throw in at the beginning of the videos. I'm also expecting today delivery of an external microphone. That piece of equipment was actually much more costly than the tripod, but I put the extra £3 towards that. I thought it'd be a worthwhile piece of equipment to go with the tripod, as if I want to record outside there'll be a lot more sort of ambient external noises, so I thought it'd be useful to have an external microphone. So yeah, I ended up spending £28 on a microphone. So the £3 extra that didn't get spent on the tripod have gone towards that. If I receive any additional money, then that will offset the cost of that microphone. So yeah, I'm hoping that I will be able to get in a little bit of practice once the microphone arrives with these completely new pieces of equipment to me. Hopefully you'll see me out and about a little bit more on future videos. It may be a week or two before we get that going, because yeah, probably need a little bit of practice. I'm not the most tech savvy, so it's all I can do to kind of get these videos edited and up on YouTube. So it may take me a while, but I will get there. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And it feels all the more special to me to have received that community support, given everything that's been going on in our online knitty and creative community recently. I just wanted to speak briefly about this. I'm not going to spend too long because I'm not particularly articulate on these sorts of subjects. I don't consider myself to be a particularly politically active person, both in real life and certainly not in my sort of online life. But I do think it's important to speak up for people, not to speak for people, but to speak up for people when you see that people are hurting and struggling and have been treated unfairly in our community. So yeah, as I say, it won't have escaped your notice that there's been lots of things going on in in the community. It's all sort of started back at the beginning of the year, and I remember I spoke about it on one of my previous videos, that I hope to create an inclusive space here. And funnily enough, it was, I think, one of the only videos I've ever posted that got any thumbs down. So it's obviously a very divisive subject, and despite more and more conversations happening, particularly over on Instagram, and more knowledge and learning coming out of those conversations, there's still a bunch of people who just want to stick to the knitting. And while I appreciate the sentiment, it's also a very privileged position to be in, to be able to stick to the fun things in life and kind of gloss over and ignore the things that are happening around us. As I say, I'm not particularly articulate on these sorts of subjects, and I can only speak from my own sort of personal point of view, but I thought I didn't want to be silent about it any longer, and I just wanted you to know that I am here to stand up for people, and I want to make this an inclusive space. I won't tolerate any comments that aren't in that vein, and luckily I have not had to deal with that so far. I'm a super small channel, and I guess I don't always talk about the sort of controversial things. I have got tons of learning to do myself. I definitely was very guilty of being one of those people who, up until recently, felt that they didn't see colour in people. Where I grew up was very multicultural. Where I live now is very white. But yeah, at school I had 3 very close friends. One was white, one was Cantonese, one was Jamaican. My dad's best friend was Asian. So I really did grow up, I was lucky to grow up in a kind of multicultural environment. But more and more recently, I've learnt that that's not really the way to see things. If we witness things that are going on in our community that aren't inclusive, we should stand up in support of people who are having bad experiences. I'm not going to say anything else, and I don't know if I've actually managed to string a coherent sentence together. It's something very difficult to talk about, but that's not to say that we shouldn't talk about it. And yeah, as I say, I'm learning, and I'm sure I'm going to be continuing to make mistakes, like thinking that I don't see in colour when I know that I should. What I'm trying to say is I am here for everyone, and I think we should all try and support each other. And if we see things that are wrong in our community, we should speak out against them. And I say it's important not to speak for people, but to stand up for people. I'm not sure if I have made myself very clear. I probably haven't. One of the reasons that I don't often speak out about these things is because I don't have the words, but that shouldn't put people off of not speaking. We can stumble through, we can make mistakes. It's the way that we deal with mistakes that is the important thing. I guess in summary, perhaps the most succinct things I can say is I am supportive of Ravelry's decision, and I'm here for inclusivity. Everyone is welcome. Please be respectful of each other. If I see anyone in my space who is not being respectful of each other, then I reserve the right to ban people and delete comments as I see fit. Hopefully you will understand, and as I say, I've not had to deal with any of that in my community so far, but I still think it's important that I take a clear stance and let you know my feelings on the matter. I think after that big old ramble, it's time to move on to the knitting, spinning and crochet content of my video. I think I am going to start with knitting this week. I have a work in progress and a finished object to show you. My knitting this week has not progressed at a very fast pace. So when I left you last week, you will remember that I was very close to finishing the Derby cardigan, so it will be no surprise that this is my finished object this week. But I started off the week by saying to myself, I will not do any other knitting at home until I have put on the button band and sewn up the Derby. And of course, sewing up a garment and putting on the button band is not the most interesting thing, so I procrastinated a lot. And I've had this distraction of the Tour de Fleece this week, so a lot of spinning has been happening. So that was an excuse for me not to knit and finish this cardigan. But on Friday evening, Friday. I finally bit the bullet and I finished it, and I'm really pleased to have it finished. This is my oldest knitting whip. I looked on Ravelry and I cast it on back in January 2018, so 18 months ago. This was the last thing on my needles from my 12 cast-ons of Christmas, from not this past year but obviously the year before. So here it is. It is all finished. Oh, so difficult to show. It's a beast, but it's exactly what I wanted. It's a nice cozy oversized chunky cardigan that I can throw on in the winter. The sleeves turned out a little bit long, so I folded the cuffs back. That makes them perfect. It also means that I can pull them down and, you know, cozy up my hands inside the sleeves if I want to when the weather is cold. It's blazing hot here in South Wales today. No need for a chunky cardigan. I made a couple of modifications to the pattern. If you've watched here before, you'll have heard me go on and on about this because it's been on the needles for so long. This is a pattern by Martin Story for Rowan, and this was in their little pattern booklet that comes out with any of their select yarns. This Rowan Hemp Tweed Chunky was one of their selects, so it's like a limited edition yarn they bring out every now and then. I knit my cardigan in the Rioja colourway. And in the original pattern, if I can find a decent picture of it, there's this sort of stockingette panel before you go into the pattern, which I didn't like, so I left that out. The other big modification that I made is once I had finished this and put on the buttons, I tried it on, and the first thing, just sort of subconsciously, I went to do was put my hand in pockets, and there weren't any pockets. So I have actually, oops, sorry, move the chair there that you're balanced on. Sooner I get to grips with that tripod, the better, eh? So what I did was I put in a couple of pockets, if you can see that there. I basically just knit 2 squares and sewed them on to the bottom of the cardigan afterwards, so they blend in quite nicely. I just did a sort of couple of pattern repeats and I can fit my hand in there nicely. But that was the second modification that I made, and I'm so pleased that I've done that. So now I can call this cardigan finished. I used some beautiful buttons that I have had in my little sort of stash of things that have been waiting, like my precious things. Sounding a bit like Gollum, aren't I? My precious. Do you have those? Like a little stash of things that you just want to find the perfect use for them. So a little while ago, my friend Erin, who is Dufferin24 over on Instagram, and has she has her own YouTube channel as well, which I shall link below. She sent me a beautiful card of buttons from Cat's Eye Collective. Hi Kelly, if you're watching, I know you do sometimes. So these were handmade buttons. This was the card they were on. And you can find Kelly on Facebook and Instagram as Cat's Eye Collective. And Erin had sent me these gorgeous wooden buttons, handmade by Kelly, and I think they are the perfect fit for my Derby cardigan. They've got these sort of little anchors on, which are absolutely adorable. I love these buttons so much. There's been a couple of projects in the recent past that I've contemplated putting these buttons on, but for one reason and another they didn't quite work out. And now I realise it was because they were waiting to go on to the Derby cardigan. They are absolutely perfect. So yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to have this project off of the needles and ready to wear when the weather cools down. Sorry, I'm busy down here fiddling, trying to do the buttons up. I can't see what I'm showing you because I've completely covered my screen. But hopefully you've got an idea there of what the Derby cardigan looks like. I have one knitting work in progress, so the only other thing that I've worked on this week apart from the Derby is my Midsummer Meadow jumper, which is the pattern that I started last week from an issue of the Knitter magazine, and this is the pattern as shown in the magazine. I've stuck broadly to these colours, although as you'll see in a minute, I didn't go for a sort of tealy sort of duck eggy blue green as they've gone for there. My blue is a lot brighter, but I've managed to put in a fair amount of work on my jumper this week, and this is what it is looking like. very difficult to show because it's like bunched up on the needles. I do have a marker in here if I can show you. So last week when I showed you, I'd knit from the top here to the button marker there, and as you can see I've more than doubled what I have done on this sweater, which I'm just loving how this is turning out. The colour combo I think is beautiful. I really do love the bright blue against the yellow and the brown. Oh, I wish I could sort of spread this out a little bit easier to show you. Yeah, it kind of, every time I pick it up, it's reminding me of like one of those medieval sort of illuminated manuscripts. I think the colours, the sort of the gold and the blue in particular, just kind of remind me of that for some reason. I am almost to the point where I am splitting for the sleeves. If you remember, if you watched last week, I've made a slight modification in that I've gone up a needle size because technically the pattern as written is slightly too small for me in terms of fit, so it's not too far off. I figured if I go up a needle size, then that will hopefully give me the additional room that I need. So yeah, I'm very close to being able to split for the sleeves. Because I've gone up a needle size, obviously that does affect my row gauge as well as my stitch gauge. So for the bigger sizes, so if I can probably show you on the picture. So I am here at the moment, I'm just about to start this pattern repeat here, and on this size, which is obviously one of the smaller sizes, the sleeves then get sort of split there. For the bigger sizes, you actually split the sleeves I think after the next pattern repeat, so after the next arrow, but because I have gone up a needle size, I am going to be at the sort of recommended length from the top to there for splitting for the sleeves after this pattern repeat. So I think I shall sort of make a slight modification to the pattern in sort of the biggest size to accommodate for my sort of extra row gauge there. I did, after I finished recording last time, notice that there is very frustratingly a mistake in one of the charts. So if you can see, again, I'll show you the picture. On this particular sort of diamond panel here, there are some crosses, and then there are just some little sort of dots, just call them dots, in between the crosses. I don't want to show you the chart because obviously it's in a paid for magazine, but those little dots are not on the colourwork chart. So my first pattern repeat of that diamond shape does not have them. So I think, but I actually like that feature of the pattern, because in some of the other motifs, so for instance this one here, where you've got squares, there's some dots coming off of the squares and between the squares, and I like the way that those dots are sort of reflected in that chart there as well. So I think for the future pattern repeats, I'm going to add those extra dots in. It will also make things easier for the stranding, because instead of having a long sort of 5 stitch repeat there, that will be broken up by a yellow stitch sort of in between those. So I'm going to put that in for the other repeats of that chart down the body, and then once I'm finished I'm going to go back and duplicate stitch the dots in, which is a bit laborious and boring, but it was either that or rip out that whole panel and start again, which I didn't want to do either. Particularly as I didn't really notice, so where my marker is, I was kind of halfway down that panel last time, and I think I got halfway through this sort of arrow panel before I actually glanced at the sort of photograph of the thing and realised that those dots were missing, and then I thought, oh, have I done something wrong? And I went back to the chart and it's just not shown on the chart. So yeah, I don't want to rip back rows and rows of stranded colourwork knitting just to put those in. I'm hoping this week to knit the rest of this panel, and then I will then split for the sleeves and put the project onto waste yarn. I'll probably block it and then see where we are in terms of fit. I did have one suggestion on last week's video after I mentioned about being unsure of the fit, about adding an extra repeat of the colour chart, which I can absolutely do. So thank you for that suggestion. If I need that, I shall bear that in mind. The other thing that I thought about doing, if the sweater doesn't end up fitting quite right is I thought I could actually steek the sweater once it's done and add wide-ish button bands if I need an extra little bit of room. So I'm hoping one way or another I shall end up with a sweater that I'm happy with. That's it for knitting this week. I didn't get around to starting the shawl that I wanted. I showed the pattern last week of the Stephen West Helix shawl that I wanted to start in my handspun, but that was mostly because I procrastinated with my Derby cardigan. So I'm hoping to cast that on this week. On to crochet. I started a new crochet project this week. Where is it? What have I done with it? I haven't got very far, but I have a little to show you. It's not in a project bag yet. It's just in a sort of tote bag that I use to take stuff backwards and forwards to work. So now I'm up here with my project bag so I can get it into a proper bag, and then yeah. Hopefully I won't be searching all over when I need to find it. If you followed for a while, you might remember that I am a yarn shop owner. I own a small bricks and mortar yarn shop in the town where I live, South Wales, just outside of Cardiff, here in the UK. And on a Wednesday morning, we have a crochet group in the shop. So I like to try and do a little bit of crochet when I have that group, if I can. So I started a new project this week. It's one that's been on my list that I wanted to have a go at for ages. And this is the Lost in Time shawl by Joanna Lindell, I think, also known as Me Jo Crochet. Yeah, Joanna Lindell. It's a free pattern. You'll find it on the Me Jo Crochet blog. And I've seen loads of really pretty versions of this shawl, and I've wanted to have a go at it for a little while. So Wednesday was the perfect excuse to start. I have made a little bit of progress. So this is where I am so far. So I've gone through the first sort of the setup pattern basically for this shawl. I'm now about to start. There's I think an 11 row pattern repeat, which you then just go through until the shawl is as big as you want it to be. So yeah, I'm about to sort of start that main body of the shawl there. There's lots of really fun sort of patterns in this shawl, but when you come down to it, it's fairly straightforward in terms of its trebles and doubles, or the shawl is written in American terminology, so it's doubles and singles and chains, of course. I'm using some yarn that has been hanging around in the shop in my sale bucket. I always have a sale bucket at the front of the shop for absolutely ages. I don't have the label with me, but it's a company called Designer Yarns. They no longer exist, and the yarn is called Designer Yarns Sparkles, and it was Sparkles with a Z. I guess they were being cool. And it is a mix of acrylic, wool and sort of metallic polyester, I would imagine. And yeah, as I say, it's been hanging around in the sale bucket for ages, and I just got sick of looking at it. So I thought I would pull it out of the bucket and make something with it. My ball ended up in several little sections because the join where this sort of blue sort of metallic sparkle bit is absolutely awful, and it's split every time I got to that join. It was basically very, very loosely plied with the sort of main yarn, which is this wool acrylic blend, as sort of singles. The metallic and the singles were just very loosely sort of twisted together and just kept falling apart. So yeah, it's not the best yarn, but it's working out pretty nicely. I like the colours in the yarn. There's sort of some blues and some natural sort of beigey kind of colours, and I think it will look quite pretty in this shawl. Happy accident that the row with the blue sparkle has ended up very symmetrical. So I don't know if you can see, I've got one popcorn at the top of each side there that's in the sort of beigey colour, and then the rest of the row is the blue metallic. But obviously the bigger the rows get, the shorter these sort of colour repeats are going to be, so I'll end up with just bits of the blue metallic sort of scattered in here and there. So yeah, that's going to be my crochet project for the next few weeks. And finally, on to spinning. The Tour de Fleece started last Saturday, so I am busy spinning away through my basket of Hilltop Cloud fibres, and I have a video up on the channel a couple of episodes ago chatting about my plans for Tour de Fleece. So if you are interested in hearing about them in more depth, then you can pop over to that video and give it a watch. But this week I've got a finished yarn and a couple of spins in progress to share with you. So as always, earlier on in the week, as I was about to start my spins, I recorded a few little sections here and there, so I'm going to pop one of those in here for you. Yay, it's Saturday, which means Tour de Fleece starts today. It's quite early in the morning. I have got about an hour or so before I head into work, but I thought I'd show you the first projects that I'm going to throw on my wheel and my spindle. So on my spindle, I've got the first bump from this lovely sample pack. Put it the right way up. So this is the Colours of Cambria, the Steam collection, and this is the Cambrian wool. So I've got this lovely sort of black, charcoaly grey, even some hints of sort of purpley tones in there. There's 21 grams of fibre there, so that's going to go onto my spindle. And then I weighed this out, I've got 91 grams of this fibre. When I did my original video, I didn't know the fibre content for this, and I've now found it out. It's a blend of 58% merino, 25% blue face Leicester, 14% silk and 4% stellina, I think. Don't know if that adds up, but it's something like that. So I think you can see the lovely sparkles going on here. I'm not going to do anything particularly special with this. It seems really well blended, so I'm just going to strip it down and spin it through the wheel. I'm happy to say that I completed the spin of the yellow fibre, and this is the skein that I ended up with, which I think is really pretty, and I think the sparkle is probably showing up quite well on the camera. I've spun with a couple of yarns before that had a little bit of stellina or sparkle in, but this one has been by far the nicest so far. The stellina was very well blended into the yarn. I think a couple of other yarns that I've spun, the sparkle has been in sort of like one section or two sections throughout the fibre, and has sort of come out in clumps, whereas this was very well spread throughout the braid of fibre. So yeah, it's come out very nicely. I've ended up with 251 metres out of 90 grams of fibre. I haven't actually, I'm assuming it's probably around about a sport weight, because that tends to be what I end up with. I've got a little gadget here down here off screen that I'm just trying to measure this against. This is sort of about 18 or so wraps, between 16 and 18 wraps per inch, depending on the part of skein that I'm measuring. I have this little device from Hilltop Cloud. There's kind of like an inch marker cut out there. You can wrap your yarn to get your wraps per inch, but there's also this little gauge, so if you sort of hold your yarn up against the gauge, measure here and sort of measure how thick the yarn is, at the top here it sort of tells you roughly what sort of weight you're getting. So yeah, I'm in the sort of sport weight, probably fingering weight in some parts for that yarn. So yeah, that was a nice spin. I ended up chain plying it, so it's a nice 3-ply yarn, and I'm really enjoying the 3-ply yarns at the moment. So that was my finished spin for the week. The other spin that you saw in that video was me starting the Cambrian pack, the Steam colour pack, and I have been busy spinning away on that this week, and I've managed to spin 4 colours. I'm just trying to get these in the right order from that pack. So on my super fancy storage bobbins, otherwise known as the centre of a toilet roll, here are the first 3 colours in that Steam pack. The 4th is on my spindle. I need to wind that off. I need to go and find another storage bobbin. And then I have one more, which is a slightly deeper red, to go onto the spindle. So I'm going to start that today. And that will be that pack spun up on my beautiful spindle, which I affectionately call Milford, and this was purchased from Whimsy Wood and Wool when I was over in New Zealand. I was wasn't quite sure what to do with these yarns. I didn't have a particular plan for them. They make obviously a nice kind of gradient, which they're sort of intended to. Can't hold everything up. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making a complete pig's ear of this. So yeah, they make obviously a nice gradient. Spinning for Team Hilltop Cloud. So all the fibres that I'm spinning during the Tour de Fleece are Hilltop Cloud fibres. I was inspired by another lovely lady over in that forum who had a Cambrian gradient pack in a different colour. I think hers was the Mountains colourway, and she had some natural Cambrian fibre in her stash, which she has spun up and plied for a really interesting sort of high contrast, mild kind of yarn. And I also happen to have some Cambrian natural in my stash, which I picked up at Wonderwall, so I'm thinking of doing the same. I think this is going to be a really fun, interesting yarn. I'll end up two-plying it, but there'll be some sections like when I sort of ply the white with the black, that's going to be very dramatic, and then there'll be others like the grey is much closer to the black, but I think it'll make a really fun, interesting yarn. So that is my plans. I'm going to spin through the final bump, and then I'm going to split this down into manageable sections for my spindle, spin that up and ply those together. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to do that before the tour ends in a couple of weeks. Because I finished the yellow yarn, I also started a second spin on my wheel, so I'm going to pop in a little bit of video to show you what the fibre looked like before I started spinning. I shall be throwing a new spin on the wheel today. I'm really excited because I'm going to be working with this gorgeous braid of Cambrian from Hilltop Cloud. See if I can focus in on that. It's this year's Tour de France colourway, and it's Welsh Mule and Blueface Leicester. Look at all the beautiful colours in there. I think I'm going to make it a 3-ply yarn because I just really enjoy 3-ply yarns at the moment. I'm not sure if it's going to be traditional or chain plied. I'm going to unbraid the braid and see what the fibre looks like when it's all laid out. I love this. There's so many beautiful colours in here, although I do think that maybe some of these sort of pops of bright orange and mustardy sort of yellows might sort of get distilled a bit in the drafting and spinning procedure. I've noticed that a lot of vibrant colours sort of dull down a bit because you're spreading the fibre out, therefore diluting the colours a bit, but we'll see what we get. I think it's going to make a fun yarn because there's so many beautiful colours in there. Here is the beautiful braid all laid out. I still am not entirely sure what to do with it. If you've watched me before, you know that I often sort of split the braids down and then sort of spin them. I'm wondering whether, just for a change, to split this braid vertically, so rip off sort of big sections of it and then just spin it from end to end. So I might just try and lay the braid out in 3 pieces and see what sort of colour progression that gives me. So I divided the braid down into sort of 3 roughly equal parts, and then I've twisted it round on itself slightly just to try and give an idea of what colours might come together. There are some sections where the colours meet up, there are some where you get a few more in there. I don't think there's going to be, well, I know there isn't a right or wrong way to spin any of these, so yeah, I think I'm just going to have a go at doing that. I'm going to split it down horizontally and then just go for it. And as you saw in that video clip, I decided to split the braid in 3 horizontally, which I'd not done before, and just spin up the bobbins, and I'm going to apply them together. Last night I managed to finish the 3rd of the 3 bobbins, so here they are all lined up side by side. So today my task is going to be to ply these together just in the traditional 3-ply way. So I shall be putting these onto my Lazy Kate and just taking an end of each and plying them all together. I have to say, by the end of the spin, I was glad to see it done, not because there's anything wrong with the fibre. It was absolutely beautiful. It's the Cambrian base again from Hilltop Cloud, which is a mix of BFL and Welsh Mule. But despite what you might see from the outside of these bobbins, there was a hell of a lot of colours that were more like this bobbin, so a lot of the greens and a lot of the purples and not much of these lovely sort of oranges and yellows. I've recently finished the Wildcraft yarn that I showed a couple of episodes ago, which was in their English garden colourway, and also the green gradient that I spun up from the lovely merino that Caroline sent me. I've been spinning a lot of green recently, and this last bobbin in particular, this top layer was the only bit that wasn't really in the sort of green colour range. Underneath here there's a lot of green, so yeah, I'm looking forward to moving away from greens for a while. So that is everything that I have for you this week. I think I'm going to need to do a fair amount of editing on this video. There's been lots of pauses. It's getting really hot up here in my attic room, and yeah, so I think at the moment the video is looking to be about 50 minutes long if I don't edit a bunch of it out. So yeah, anyway, I'm adding to the length of this video by waffling about nothing. So I'm going to sign off and say a very big thank you to everyone who has stuck with me and watched the entirety of the video. I hope that you have a wonderful week if you can, and you get to enjoy some of the things that you love. And until next time, great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now.